there's something I'm trying to say, does it even matter who I am, what I do, how I grow as a person? In light of the fact that it can be completely misinterpreted.
Yeah. I think it does matter.
It does.
It's just like, it's not 100% in our control at all.
It won't result in someone understanding necessarily. Yeah.
But again, I do think it matters. I think, Naz, your journey of your Bengali self and English self, and that journey matters in what you create, even if someone reading your poetry isn't aware of that journey, doesn't clue into it, it still mattered in what you created, and therefore it matters, right? And it's part of the poem, even if I don't clue into it. My experience of the poem also matters, even if I am not connecting very deeply to your actual experience. Welcome to the Embracing Mystery podcast. Join us as we explore together ways that we can embrace creative and spiritual mystery in our lives and simultaneously find ourselves embraced in the mystery of compassionate, creative interconnection, held by what may be called the divine or source or consciousness or even mystery itself. In the process, we seek to become more fully ourselves, find our home and places of belonging, and grow as creative, spiritual, and relational beings.
Well, welcome to episode 7 of the Embracing Mystery podcast. In today's episode, we are going to be picking up where we left off, which is we were talking about the role of the communicator or the artist and the audience in terms of making meaning, and particularly looking at how much of that depends on the person who's receiving as an audience. That, say, the artist might be trying to communicate some kind of, for example, unit of experience. That doesn't mean at all that that's what the end receiver, the audience, is going to get. So in today's episode, we're going to be taking the next step of looking at the question of, in what ways does your own growth as a person matter for your art? Or more specifically, as some examples, how does it matter if you're cultivating a deeper interconnection and compassion for yourself, your own deepest self, or how you build relationships of empathy and justice with others, or even just your connection with nature and the cosmos, or with your understanding of reality? And so to start that today, we'll go to a practice from Kevin, and then we'll come into talking a little bit more about some communication theory, and then getting into our own experience of how our growth as people has shaped our work. So to begin, Kevin, would you like to open us with a practice?
Yeah, thank you, Stephen. And since we're talking about communication and connection and compassion, I'm going to suggest a practice in which in just a few moments, I'll give us some time of quiet. And I'm going to ask us all just to try to remember, sort of conjure up within ourselves a time when we felt really connected. And that could be a time you felt really connected with yourself. And it could be a time when you felt really connected with another person or group of people, a time when you felt really connected with nature, a time when you felt really connected with however you understand ultimate reality, or maybe some mixture of those is fine. And so I'm just going to give us some time. And instead of doing anything with that, I'm not going to ask you to, okay, now that you've, picked a time that you remember, try to analyze or anything like that. I just really want to give us some time to find one of those memories and just, as best we can, re-experience it, what it felt like, not asking ourselves, what does that feel like? How would I describe it? But just experiencing it again as kind of a grounding for the rest of our time together. And so hopefully that's something that those of you listening will be able to do as well. And we'll take some time now to do that. And I'll just give us a minute or so of silence to try to connect with that. So let's begin. Okay, well, let's bring ourselves back. And Stephen, I'll turn it back to you briefly. And
I will turn it back to you.
Right back to me.
Because I have asked Kevin to begin by explaining a little bit more about relevance theory of communication, of how that looks at the communication event between and meaning making. So
great. Thank you.
Yeah, and then we'll have a chance to respond to some of that.
That's great. Yeah, and there's nothing magic about relevance theory as a communication theory. There's lots of communication theories out there. It just so happens that that's my PhD used relevance theory as a theoretical frame as I was looking at translation as a form of communication, and particularly of sacred texts. And so that's what I got my PhD in, which some have described as permanent head damage. So that's what I'm going to share, just because it's a framework that then we can use as a basis of conversation, not because it's something that is, imprinted on the nature of the universe as the only correct theory. But and just really quickly, what relevance theory is a communication theory that is grounded in both the cognitive sciences and pragmatics, and not just like pragmatics as in that's a really pragmatic person, but as a theory of language and how that works. So in other words, relevance theory is about how does communication work and why does it not work at times. And I think the best way to get at this is I'm going to just give just a brief summary of a joke that a lot of people might have heard, where there's these prisoners and they've been in jail for a long time together and they've all heard each other's jokes forever. And so they've gotten it down to where they've numbered all the jokes, and they just sit around during the day and say, all right, let's tell jokes. And Stephen will say number 40 and everybody laughs. And, maybe Naz will say number 32 and everybody laughs. Well, there was a new prisoner who came in and watched and observed and thought, okay, they just pick numbers and laugh. And so he picked a number he hadn't heard yet, 138. And there was dead silence. Nobody laughed. And he thought, what's going on? And one of the prisoners said, well, some people just don't know how to tell a joke. So there's lots of very technical language that relevance theory would use to try to explain what was happening in that moment. For those prisoners, it would cognitive environment, cognitive effects, inference, direct and indirect communication, which ironically, since it's a communication theory, they don't mean by direct and indirect what we would normally mean. But instead of going into all that, here's how, in sort of simple language, relevance theory would explain what was happening. So the prisoners all share a common set of experiences, memories, and meaning, except, of course, for the new prisoner. So they all share what relevance theory would call a cognitive environment. And therefore, they can navigate meaning within that. And they are all using minimal effort to achieve the maximum intended effect of their communication. Relevance theory suggests that we just do that intuitively as we communicate. Both as a recipient, we are looking for the cognitive impact of what somebody might be saying that first seems to make sense to us. In other words, that seems relevant to me. It offers me effects that matter to me. And we're filtering out all the other stuff, including the stuff that we think would take too much work to try to get at. We are constantly doing that.
Now I know why I get exhausted.
And that's what, and communicators do the same thing. We're intuitively picking things that we don't have to say everything that might need to be said so that someone will, quote unquote, get it. Okay. So so relevance theory would explain that as the, minimal effort for maximum cognitive effect. And the other thing that relevance theory would point out about that incident is the meaning that they share is not only in the words that they're using. Number 32 means a lot more than the words number 32. And that's just part of how we communicate all the time, which gets at some of the topics we were talking about in our last session. And it all works, or it works to the degree that those cognitive environments are shared. And the more that's shared, the less you have to work. The less that's shared, the more you have to work. I think I got that right? Sometimes I get these things twisted around. So that's a sort of non-technical explanation. That's relevance theory's way of accounting for when communication works, That's when either the cognitive environments are pretty matched, or the expectations of how much work is this communication event going to require of me as a communicator and a recipient. When those match up, then we tend to communicate. So if I start doing a calculus lecture and you're there to take it, you're going to expect it's going to be a little difficult, right? But it also accounts for when things misfire. And that can be because cognitive environments are different. And so we're using words that make no sense to us, and when our expectations of effort and effect are misfiring. And that's why, the experiences we've all had where somebody immediately jumps to a conclusion about something we meant, and it really frustrates us because they haven't really listened. It's because they have exerted the amount of effort they're willing to exert to get the effect that is meaningful to them, that is relevant to them. But it can also, and this is the last point I want to make, I think the idea of cognitive environment within relevance theory can also help us get at something that I would call an excess of meaning in our communication. So, for example, if I say, I love being in the mountains, we've all got some idea of a mountain, right?
Well, I just made you into a dwarf who lives in the mountain.
Well, okay.
So, yeah.
But you know what a mountain is that I would be in. You have a picture in your mind of a mountain.
In my cognitive environment.
In your cognitive environment. And it probably, and all of our ideas of mountains, and if there's, listeners out there, all our ideas of mountains, unless we've never seen a mountain and never heard about a mountain, which is,
if you're from Kansas,
going to be pretty rare. Yeah, that's right. Kansas.
From Kansas, I can say it.
We're not in Kansas anymore. We've all got mountainness in there somewhere, right? And so we're able to connect because we share that in our cognitive environment. And yet, my experiences of mountains and Naza's experience of mountains, or Raymond's or Stephen's, might be very, very different. We may immediately be imagining very different types of mountains. And that means that while we are connecting and communicating, there's also more meaning going on in both the communicator and the recipient than what we've actually connected around. And then if there's levels of cognitive environment, like each of us have our own personal cognitive environment. Nobody else has Stephen's cognitive environment exactly, right? But then there's sort of general, if you start taking those circles out, general cultural shared cognitive environments, and then sort of similar cultural cognitive environments, right? But there is kind of a shared humanity level as well, and that's when it starts to get trickier, of course, because we share less of the specifics, but there is a human cognitive environment, and that's where I think it gets really interesting with the kind of conversation we had last time about a recipient, a listener to a song, and their own interpretation of that song, their own experience. That's happening within their cognitive environment, which may or may not link to the cognitive environment of the artist. And yet somehow it does live in this overall human shared cognitive environment at some level, which means that actually there's the potential for both the communicator and the recipient of that communication to be sending messages they didn't intend to send. That may still be incredibly meaningful and attached to the message they sent. My mountain message is going to be very meaningful to people who take that in directions I never imagined or whatever. So there's an excess of meaning in every communication event, which I think makes especially in the world of the arts, makes things really fascinating. And there's then legitimate levels of added meaning. So I think that's enough, more than enough for relevance theory.
Sure. Well, and so my follow-up question is then, in light of that, and we can interact with that theory itself, not to say that this is, I don't know other communication theory, but at the table you can disagree if you like.
Sure, absolutely.
But my question is, what's that mean then for how our growth as a person or cultivation of a compassionate or interconnected life at those kind of different levels, whatever way you do that in your life, how does that matter for our art if this is, or something like this is how communication or meaning making happens between people in a communication event?
Yeah. I talked a lot, so I'd love to hear another voice on when I listen back to this.
I can offer something. So I feel like this is kind of something maybe I've been harping on for several episodes, but the sort of like perspective toolbox idea, that one of the ways that I feel like anyone can grow as a creative person or grow creative capacities is to absorb and be sort of omnivorous and very curious with respect to like just having access to different worlds of thinking, worlds of symbols, associated sort of tools and methodologies. Because even just thinking about the word, the word compassion or the word empathy, it is, these are sort of like words about sentience and about feeling out and feeling together and feeling with. And I think a major step towards being able to do that is to open yourself up to experiences and worlds and just like modes of being that aren't your own. Just sort of a self-expansion in that way. If that makes sense.
Yeah. I was interested when you said the word curious, because I think curiosity is that kind of function in us that already is beginning to reach out towards something in a sort of, in some ways, disinterested. In other words, it's not just about me communicating, it's about me learning, it's about me discovering something new. So I'm already pressing into that, which is already creating a connection with that idea or person that I'm getting curious about. And that then can change me. My cognitive environment can change, right? It can grow. And I think sometimes maybe in the conversation we had last time about, Raymond wrote this song, this is what he poured into it. Somebody else takes it this direction. It may not seem to have any connection. But if they're not curious, or if Raymond's not curious about pressing into that, then both are just kind of left isolated, right? And I think the potential in those differing levels of interpretation, it can get unlocked. I think curiosity is a really key thing. So I'm glad I think it's an element of compassion and empathy and growth as a person. So
yeah. And just to kind of add a tag onto that, because when you were talking, the image in my head, I like watching like time-lapse photography of plants.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, the national pastime. And just, if you've ever seen kind of like someone planting like an onion in, an onion in soil, and like you see the little, the roots and shoots, they look like little worms. They're traveling. They're kind of like, exploring and excavating new territory. And in that way, they both sort of connect to their greater environment, but also expand themselves. And find new territory. And so I guess that's just kind of what was arising in me. It's a very deeply like biological.
Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah, motif.
I like that. Yeah,
it's good.
We're all onion worms.
Great. Naz, do you have any thoughts or?
Yeah, I guess I'm thinking about my journey as a poet.
Okay.
I've been writing poetry since I was in middle school. Just writing my interior life on paper, but I wasn't really exposed to a lot of poetry. So it was kind of like whatever I was learning in school. So that was like rhymes and things like that. Very, very limited.
Sure.
And then I get to college and then my entire world opens up. I feel like my vocabulary opens up as well as I'm reading authors I've never been exposed to before from different cultures, translations, from different languages, I don't know. I think you mentioned did you mention terrain or something like that? Yeah. Finding all this new terrain involving poetry and seeing how much more expansive it is versus what I learned in elementary or middle school, and kind of building upon that, kind of thinking about language and how that's shaped me. So when I got to grad school, I was really struggling with language. Because that's when I realized my brain was bilingual, even though I communicate mostly in English, just being away from my family and my my mom especially, who speaks Bengali to me, I was really struggling with communicating. And that's when I realized like, oh, I have to like formally learn the Bengali language because my brain is bilingual, even if my mouth is not.
Yeah.
Your cognitive environment includes all of that.
Yeah. I thought, I just didn't really think of it. I'm like, well, I use English mostly. It's not a big deal if I'm not in touch with the language of like my parents, but that's what I grew up with.
And it's in there.
Yeah. And actually, I think, I don't know how it works in my brain. I'm sure there's like a linguistic term for it.
Me. Yeah.
But yeah, if I'm not practicing Bengali, at least like listening to it, I feel like my creativity and like my English suffers.
Really
I
interesting.
Don't explain it.
Yeah.
But that's what I learned. So I went and got into a program to actually study grammar and like things like that. And I realized, oh, like I need to keep this up. Like that is like a part of myself and my growth as like a creative person. Like I can't lose that.
Yeah. No, that's really fascinating.
So that's shaping, like even when you're doing a work, say in English, it still matters whether you're using your Bengali or connected to it.
Yeah, very much.
Mm-hmm.
Interesting.
I don't know how to explain it, but...
No, I think it makes perfect sense. I don't know how to explain it either, but it intuitively just makes a lot of sense. And I, as a person who's learned, another language really well and a couple of other languages less well, there's like, I'm a different person in those languages. My personality, but eventually then my personalities merged. And more of my American English self got more like my Pakistani Urdu self. And for which I'm really grateful. But that's the lens through which I'm getting cognitive effects from your communication, which may or may not have anything to do with what you were trying to say, but it means a lot to me, what you shared. So, yeah.
Well, and what you were saying kind of ties into, even just for this episode, I was coming into it asking this question of, okay, if the communication event has so much around what happens in the audience, then what matters? Then what matters about how we're growing, or if that doesn't change what they're hearing. But what you're saying is kind of assuming like, that it does in fact still matter, which was my assumption coming into it, but I still had to ask the question. Not to say that all communication is futile and pointless, because it's not. But your explanation of your own experience of that seems to kind of really point to how integral it is to your own internal journey in terms of who you are as a person, that deeper connection with yourself, like all of yourself, and actually integrating that. Yeah.
That's what I was thinking as you started, was that you were describing how your own personal development and continuing to press into that shapes your art. Like, okay, if I'm going to write poetry, I still need to be in touch, even if it's in English. Right. I need to be in touch with that part of me that is deeply embedded in Bengali cognitive environment, or it's embedded in me, or whatever. And that's a formation or development step.
It is.
And directly relates to your creativity. So
I have a question about that. So, and Kevin, you also mentioned like knowing multiple languages. So this is just for everyone, obviously. Naz, you were talking about the more sort of functional aspects of this sort of bilingual nature of your mind, where like if you don't feed both, like it, like your ability to do the thing suffers. But I'm also kind of wondering if, well, because what kind of triggered this question to me was, Kevin, you were talking about how you're kind of you're a different version of yourself depending on what you're operating from. Like, does it affect, the symbol system that you pull from, or like what you're expressing, or the kind of version of yourself that you're expressing, depending on what language you're using? Because I'm trying to kind of like map the feedback loop of that.
I think for sure, because I think culture is in language are connected, right? And I think I do I feel like a lot of my worldview is pulled from like Bengali culture, and the language is tied to it. And can you say that again? Ask that again.
Yeah, I guess I was just sort of wondering, aside from the functional aspects of making sure to feed both sides of yourself to express just in general, I'm wondering if there are certain aspects of you, whether like symbols that you pull from or emotions that you're able to express or content that you're able to kind of communicate, that are only accessible in, either English or in Bengali, or like sort of just the fusion of both.
I'm trying to think about this because I feel like it's very much mixed up in my brain, but I feel like I can get more words for emotions in Bengali than in English sometimes. It's easier to find very specific words for a very specific feeling that I can't describe in like English. Or there's more words available to me in Bengali, especially with like melancholy and sadness, depression, and also love. I feel like there's way more in the Bengali language, more layers available to me that I can explore or connect to more than in English.
Yeah. And I think, and I don't want to get too far away, Stephen, from your question with this, but I think in my experience, there's in the emotional sort of vocabulary, there's the sort of way of saying, okay, if I want to say sad, English word sad, if I want to say that in Urdu, what's the word for that, right? And you're looking for that equivalent term, but there's actually the words in that semantic range, sad, grief, sorrowful, depressed, all that in English. You can learn the supposed equivalents, but there's actually a different emotional texture to those words. There's actually different emotions that I couldn't articulate until I learned those words and more of that context. Like there was more of a part of myself that I was discovering. I could feel those things, but I couldn't articulate those things except in that language. And I mean, there's just the word duk or gumgin just carry different emotions. And I think where that goes with art is, I think in the creative process, you're not necessarily exploring different language, but you are exploring different ways of using language and symbols to communicate something they don't always mean in an equivalent way. And that requires developing yourself to be curious about what am I not experiencing and understanding and seeing in the world. What new experiences, and then how to articulate that is where the artistic stuff comes in. So anyway, I think they're all really connected.
Yeah. I was thinking about it from the flip side of where, rather than, I mean, it is important how that means we need to expand our understanding and connection with others. I was thinking about, well, then what's that mean in terms of places where people do have a shared thing? And coming back to, I had a prior question last episode of like, what's that mean about spiritual, religious, traditional art? How's that functioning? For me, push back on this, but this is my current like kind of theory would be that like, it makes sense that it might, because my question was, okay, if there's a particular spiritual experience someone's trying to communicate within a particular art form that's connected to that tradition, is it actually better than any other art form at doing that? Or does it matter at all what that person was experiencing when they made it, or inspired its making? And so my wondering now is it because there's enough shared understanding of what's being said that art can function to help someone else not only just understand it, but maybe begin to get into the same heart-centered space or mind space that they were in, that say someone outside that community would definitely not have that same experience looking at it or reading it.
Yeah.
I still no.
Still no.
That's all right.
But just to maybe a particular spin on that would be that I found that I have had quite profound experiences with music in languages that I don't know.
Interesting. Yeah. Yeah.
Or I'm not trying to interpret what's being said, where it's just a very direct aesthesis. And so that's kind of why I'm still kind of pushing back on it a little bit, because even if I have no way of navigating the distinct like foundations of a particular tradition, I can still be very moved by the art produced from that tradition. And same, like, additionally, like, it's not like the lack of knowing actually increases the profundity of the experience.
Yeah.
So I don't know if it's like a linear relationship, but that's just me.
Right.
That's so interesting, because that actually came up in that exact topic came up in conversation with me yesterday with someone. We were talking about music and different languages and interpreting things. But I also like to listen to music that in languages that I don't understand, and I find it to be a much more embodied experience.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah. Because
I'm not in analysis mode.
Yeah, exactly. You can shut your brain off, that part of your brain.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
Yeah. And that's what I was saying about the lack of interpretation, where I mean, music historically has been the safest way for me to embrace being a corporeal thing. And that in of itself is like is a spiritual, loosely speaking, and integral experience. Is like, okay, stop being so, cerebral and like just shut up for a second.
Right. But I'm not sure these are mutually exclusive things.
Yeah,
I think because going to that just sort of raw experiential thing in music that may have lyrics to it, but we don't understand them, and it's in whatever Czech for me, Czechoslovakian or something, and I have no idea, but there is an emotive texture that I can plug into. I wonder, based on my own experience of songwriting, though, if some of what I'm picking up is the emotional experience that the artist themselves was trying to get into the music, right? So, which is the same as what you're trying to do with lyrics. You're trying to get something of your perception or experience into the lyrics. And because I know there's songs I have that I know what I'm feeling when I write that song. I never feel like the melody and the production and the lyrics quite capture that. But hopefully somebody is getting something from it. So anyway, yeah.
Well, and in this case, did you feel like it was music that was its intended purpose, was more or less what you were experiencing? Or is it more of an example of like, that's not what they were after at all, but this is what I got from it? Because both can happen.
Both are possible.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I think it's hard to say what the intended effect was in every single circumstance. So I think it's probably a mix of both.
For sure.
Another thing I was thinking of was like the way in which you can just use nonsense syllables, but with melody and dynamics and
like Sigur Rós or something.
Sure, yeah, that's a good example. I mean, and like Sigur Rós is like,
what's Icelandic?
It's not just Icelandic.
Okay.
It, like Jonsi also uses like a deliberately gibberish made up language. Yeah, that's a great example for precisely that reason. That's like it's actual nonsense.
Yeah, but it's beautiful.
Exactly. It still moves you because a lot of communication, especially the communication of emotions, is non-linguistic. It's tonal, it's gestural, it's like it's in how much breath you're using. And that still is, part of the excess of meaning that you were talking about, Kevin, at the beginning.
Yeah, I agree.
Can I answer what you're saying?
I think so. And the answer turns out to be it's all of the above are possible, which makes sense. But I'm partially asking
as usual.
I'm partially thinking about it because, like, okay, if I'm doing spiritual direction, for example, I often will use a poem or something, like, not to say this is how I want you to feel right now,
Right.
but rather as a starting point, rather that helps people to surface their unconscious or whatever's going on in them. In a way that feels safe, rather than just being like, tell me your deepest thoughts in this moment. Well, I don't know.
Yeah.
Like it's a safe, it's called coming, it's talked about in terms of like coming at an angle. It's a third thing that helps us to do that. Whether that's what the poet meant, it could mean many things. It's a poem. But I think about it in terms of, at least the ones that I'm using are often intended, within some kind of spiritual tradition space, to elicit something of that effect. Or for myself, there'll be lots of poems that'll just help me to calm down, like help me to be still. I'm assuming that's what they were after. I couldn't tell you. But but I'm wondering though, is my cognitive environment close enough to where they're coming from that I'm picking up a little bit of what they're doing and what their experience was either beforehand or while writing it?
Fair enough. Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah. I guess the only
Don't know.
No, it's not that. It's just like the only thing I'm wondering about, and it goes back to what you're talking about, like sort of like the pragmatics of language, right? Like at a certain point, does it matter? In other words, like especially with regards to art, this is not a cut and dry sort of position that I'm taking, but I kind of wonder if the thing that I'm interested is more often than not like what it elicits in something or someone or a connection versus like what it means.
Sure,
Right.
Because
there's
I feel
not one meaning.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
like what the search for like that kind of like, not to use a jargon term, but the hermeneutics of that.
Yeah.
That's what it is.
Like the way like the approach of interpreting or like trying to thinking into like the meaning of an art piece.
Yeah.
There's like, I feel like kind of like, what does this mean? Is kind of assumes that there is this sort of like answer of like, this means this thing universally.
Right.
And I
Right.
have
Doing like
to
a reader response
uncover.
theory.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And I just, I feel like things are in any communicative process moving too fast to actually get to the bottom of that. And it's more about kind of like, we're kind of shooting off
in like
sparks.
power dynamics of who has access to understanding it rightly.
Yeah.
So I understand that piece. I think I was coming at it from the opposite side of, if there's something I'm trying to say, does it even matter who I am, what I do, how I grow as a person?
Yeah.
In light of the fact that it can be completely misinterpreted.
Yeah.
I think it does matter.
It does.
It's just like, it's not 100% in our control at all.
It won't result in someone understanding necessarily. Yeah.
But again, I do think it matters. I think, Naz, your journey of your Bengali self and English self, and that journey matters in what you create, even if someone reading your poetry isn't aware of that journey, doesn't clue into it, it still mattered in what you created, and therefore it matters, right? And it's part of the poem, even if I don't clue into it. My experience of the poem also matters, even if I am not connecting very deeply to your actual experience. So
right, like I think of
it
nature.
still all matters.
Like I use nature symbolism in a lot of my poems, but I'm also coming at it from a South Asian perspective. But nature exists to every culture out there, so it's going to be.
So at that level, it's accessible.
It's accessible,
but that doesn't mean we're accessing.
My mention of rain is actually talking about romance, but maybe someone in a different culture might not pick up on that.
Right. Yeah, that's good.
Yeah, well, another interpretive grade for it. Yeah. Well, I think this is a good place to wrap up.
Yeah. In closing, we always will do our standard thing that, hey, subscribe, like, comment in the comments. That would be really, really helpful. And we'll be back at this again in a month. And please check out everything else Table Collective is doing on our website, tablecollective.art. But I did want to take this time, and we didn't give you any heads up on this, Raymond, but
Oh no.
because of circumstances in Raymond's life, we're very sad to say that, we've got one more episode with Raymond, and just wanted to acknowledge that so it doesn't suddenly come as a shock. Like we certainly wouldn't wait till January and then be, wait, where did he go?
Oh, Raymond got abducted.
Yeah, I guess
He
they didn't
died on the way back to his
I
home
guess
planet.
they didn't like what he was saying.
Yeah.
So no, but just to acknowledge that we've and I'm really grateful that we get another episode with you, and we'll say more then. But I just wanted to give that as a little bit of a heads up to our massive number of listeners that we have that would be shocked.
You also guys had to go back and kind of like take like the Stalin approach of just like erasing every instance of me in your collective history.
We'll just AI.
You gotta keep, you gotta keep things consistent.
Wasn't there a guy sitting there and then it's just gone? No, we won't do that.
Yeah,
But,
I'm the Trotsky here.
But we look forward to seeing everybody in the next episode, and thank you for being with us.